Welcome, future doctors, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor podcast with Dr. Sulma
and Marina, where we bring you conversations to empower and inspire you to contribute to your community and the world by becoming a doctor.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor podcast. Today, I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Dr. Miriam Padilla, who originally hails from Puerto Rico, here to share her story of entering the field of medicine and working as an endocrinologist. Dr. Padilla has studied at Case Western and did a lot of her training in Los Angeles at the USC Medical Center. And so welcome. Thank you for being here, Dr. Padilla.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. So let's kind of go back into the past a little bit. I'd love to learn more about your upbringing and what are the memorable things from your childhood?
Yeah, so I was born in Rio Piedra, Puerto Rico. My dad was in politics there and he was a physician. He was a nephrologist. My mom was a PM&R physician and my sister's a pediatrician. So it kind of runs in the family. When I was young, my mom wanted my dad to get out of politics. So we moved to the US when I was 7. My dad had gone to University of Maryland med school. And so we moved to Maryland when we moved to the US and came here, had to learn English, obviously, when I got here, lived in Maryland for a while. Then I went to school in Ohio. And then I did my residency and fellowship in LA and then moved to Utah in 2015. So kind of been making my rounds around the US.
Excellent. And what inspired you to become a doctor? I mean, I know you mentioned your dad was a doctor. Did you see what he did and say, hey, I want to do that? Or was it a little more complex? Did you circle around back to it later? How did that evolve?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I used to want to be a veterinarian. I loved animals. I just wanted to help them. But I wanted to do medical volunteer trips abroad. And I felt like I could do more as a physician or as a provider than I could as a veterinarian. And so I decided to become a doctor pretty young age because I wanted to do medical volunteering abroad.
Wonderful. Excellent. Yeah. And were there any particular barriers or challenges that you faced on your path to medicine? I know a lot of the young people that I speak to face very real challenges. Perhaps coming from a physician family, it was a little different, but there's still mindset blocks and challenges regardless of who you are, where you come from. What was that path like for you?
Yeah. So for me, definitely we were kind of expected to become doctors in our family, I think, because some of us are in medicine. So very strict kind of growing up where you're expected to get the straight A's and all of that.
Yeah.
But for me, I left high school I started college when I was 16. Mm-hmm. What I did is I kind of got bored with classes in high school and I felt like I needed to challenge myself more. So I started taking all the AP classes in high school. And then I decided I was just going to apply to college, even though I hadn't graduated high school yet. So I started college without a high school diploma. And then they let me walk in my high school diploma in my high school graduation a year later. So I started college at 16 and started med school when I was 20, which is pretty young. So being a young doctor, a lot of people didn't think of me as a doctor. Latina, young, I had braces and a ponytail at that time. Yeah. So very few people really saw me as a doctor. So I always had to kind of go out of my way to ensure that people recognize me as a physician and as a provider. And obviously you have to excel more than others because people would say I'm in college by affirmative action and I had to prove myself and all of that. So that was always an issue. When I was going into med school, at least at Case Western where I went, I felt like it was still predominantly male in terms of everybody that was in school. If you look at our med school picture, it's only the front row that's female and then 3 rows of males behind us. And definitely in residency, I faced some sexism. I remember I did a summer program, a research program in Philly, and we had a fellow who was above us at the time, and he would say things like, oh, where's your coworker? Because you're a female, you're not going to understand, so I'm only going to explain it to him, or things like that. And then in residency, I had some episodes of like sexual harassment by fellows and other people above us where, because you're staying overnight and things are said inappropriately and calling me honey in front of patients or sweetie instead of by my doctor name and my professional name and things like that. So I did have to report someone for that to the administration. So there's a lot of challenges, I think, being faced by young Latina women going into medicine. I think now there's more women, like it's maybe a better ratio female to males into going into medicine, but still you still face a lot of hardships. I remember when I was interviewing for med school, I remember they said, "Oh, well, don't you want to have kids? Like how is becoming a doctor going to impact you? Like, are you really going to be able to do this?" Which I think now, I don't think they even let them ask those questions nowadays.
Thank goodness.
Because it's not appropriate. But, I still got asked all those questions. I remember in med school, we had guys who started putting pictures of women in like bikinis and sexual poses on their locker rooms in our med school, like exposed outside where everybody could see them. And I actually had to speak to the dean of the school and say, this is inappropriate. This is a place of learning. Like, this is just not conducive to learning. And then they had to take on and talk to the students. So yeah, lots of things that we face being a Latina person.
Yeah. Excellent. What would you say was your why for going into medicine? Like, what was it that drove you to drive past all those challenges and the sexism and some racism and things like that? What drove you?
I really wanted to help people, truthfully. Like I have done volunteer trips in Haiti and Ghana and Dominican Republic and Mexico, and I've organized volunteer trips to different places. And I'm really moved by trying to fix the inequalities and injustices that we see in medicine. When I go to Mexico and I see people that are literally dying from not having access to insulin and they have neuropathy and they're in a wheelchair and it's just compared to here. And I see such kind of entitlement in some of patients. Yeah. So I really try to do what I can to fix some injustices. I had the National Health Service Scholarship for med school, which is that they pay for your med school and they give you a stipend while you're in med school. And then in return, you work in a free clinic or an underserved clinic 1 year for every year that they paid. So I worked in a free clinic doing general medicine for 7 years in Venice Beach, California. People always like, oh, how did you end up in Venice? But there's actually lots of homeless people that live on the beach and shower on the beach and so on. So we actually have a really huge underserved population there and lots of immigrants as well that we see in Venice and LA. So I got to work there for 7 years doing general medicine. And then after that commitment was repaid, then I went back and did my fellowship, already older at this point. So I had to go back to my fellowship and did that for 2 years and then moved to Utah after finishing my fellowship. So it was a little interesting going back to school once I had already been an attending, practicing for 7 years on my own and going back to studying and staying overnight at the hospital in long hours. But by then it was like, you knew what you wanted to do, right? So I knew I wanted to do endocrinology. I love primary care and I love general medicine, but there was some aspects that I didn't want to do, like chronic pain or flu season. And I feel like endocrinology, you really get to do a lot of primary care without doing some of the things I didn't want to do.
Yeah. So for some of our listeners who may not be as familiar with like the training paths in medicine, so you did your residency in internal medicine, which is basically medicine for adults, right? And you practiced for a while and then you went back and did a fellowship in endocrinology. What is endocrinology? What does that cover within the field of medicine?
Yeah. So endocrinology focuses on hormones. And hormones can include things like testosterone, thyroid, but it also includes things like bone health. So we deal with osteoporosis, we deal with thyroid cancer. It also deals with things like vitamin D deficiency because that's related to bones. We help with gender affirming care. We help with diabetes because insulin is a hormone as well. So we do a lot of diabetes care as well. We do things related to the adrenal glands that affect other hormones or pituitary gland that affects hormones. So that's mainly what we focus on. For me, in addition to the endocrinology certification, I'm also a certified diabetes educator. So we do a lot of education on nutrition and lifestyle changes. And I focus a lot on obesity and lifestyle changes as well.
Wonderful. What would you say is something that you wish more people knew about diabetes, since that's such a big one, right, that you deal with when it comes to hormones and it's such a common chronic disease in this country.
I think one reason why I liked going into diabetes specifically is because there's a lot that a patient can do to improve their well-being without requiring to pay hundreds of dollars for medicines, right? Obviously, if you're type 1, you need to take insulin and so on. But if you have type 2 diabetes, which is more seen in adults or people in obesity, you can improve your diet, your exercise, your activity, and that helps to improve your diabetes. So we try to tell them that, like, at least since I worked with some underserved patients, there are things that they can change in their day-to-day life in addition to taking meds, but that they can improve it on their own as well. And that food is power, right? Food is powerful way to help us heal as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big believer in food as medicine too, and all of those lifestyle changes. One thing
Yeah.
I hear some like commonly in the Latino community is like, oh yeah, my grandfather had diabetes, my mother have diabetes. It's just a matter of time before I get diabetes. What would you say to that? I mean, is diabetes reversible? I think a lot of people don't understand this. What would you say?
Yeah. I mean, you have a predisposition, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it, right? For me, both of my parents have diabetes. I'm in my 40s. I haven't gotten diabetes yet, but I've been
Mhm.
vegetarian since I was 13 years old. And I try to focus on my lifestyle changes and being active as much as I can and so on. So there's
Mhm.
definitely things that you can do, but it has to be a conscious effort, right? It has to
Yeah.
be something that you're actively trying to work on and focus on.
Right.
Decrease your carbohydrates and try to add more steps in your day-to-day activity and things like that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, so speaking of endocrinology, what does your day-to-day look like? You now work as an endocrinologist for Intermountain Health here in Utah. What does your schedule, your day-to-day look like for people who don't know anything about it?
Yeah, so I normally wake up around like 5:30 or so, but that's just I'm a morning person. I
Yeah.
think all the years going through training, you get used to waking up a little bit early. And then I try to be at work by 7. My first patient starts at 7:40 in the morning. I see new patients over 40-minute visits and then follow-up patients over 20-minute visits. And I personally do 12-hour days. So I work 7:40 till about 7 or 7:30 p.m.
Hmm.
And I work 3 days a week doing those kind of like 11 to 12-hour shifts. I like to do that because I'm also involved in music things, so therefore I get the weekend to do other things. On
Uh-huh.
Thursdays, I used to work as a medical director for a lifestyle medicine clinic, but that recently closed. One new interesting project we're trying to do is working with rural medicine, where I'm actually going to be going to San Juan County, which is southern kind of rural Utah, once a
Uh-huh.
month on Thursdays, seeing patients out there in San Juan County. And then I'll see them virtually one Thursday a month. So those are
Uh-huh.
my Thursdays. And then Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I'm in this Puerto Rican music group where we sing and dance and drum. And so we do presentations in elementary schools usually on Fridays, and then we
Uh-huh.
perform at festivals on the weekends. I also love gardening and hiking. So in the summer, I'm pretty much out in my garden like every day or every other day, and then hiking
Uh-huh.
on the weekends when I can.
That's amazing. And that's so cool that you're able to find that balance. I think one of the myths around becoming a physician, becoming a doctor, is that you are just going to like work, work, work and slave away. And you will not have any time for personal life. And I love that. I happen to be friends with you on Facebook and I see all the amazing travel that you do and all these other fun things. So it's so nice. Tell me a little bit more about the music interest. I believe you even have a nonprofit around that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm the executive director and founder of a nonprofit called Bomba Marile. And Bomba is music that's been played in Puerto Rico for 500 years. And I'm one of those people who feels like if you don't have what you want in the community, you got to create it, right? You got to create the community that you want. And so we started this group and we bring instructors from Puerto Rico to do free workshops for the community. I apply for grants and we get grant funding. So everything we organize ourselves is free with percussion workshops and dance workshops and performances. And then we also do some social events like domino night or like documentary viewings and discussions afterwards. So because science can be so rigid sometimes. So I find that I get to really release in music and dance and let go of my emotions and kind of be
Uh-huh.
more spontaneous and free flowing. So it's
Yeah.
a nice balance for work. I definitely did work a lot more earlier in my career in terms of when I was working the free clinic and you have to make up of some of that income. I had multiple jobs and I did per diem work like in hospitals, in a physical rehab hospital and so on. And I did that for many years. But by the time I moved to Utah, I definitely wanted that work-life balance, and I wanted to be able to have some time for myself and for my other hobbies. And so I really appreciate that I've been able to kind of make those 12-hour days so then I have always more of a 3-day weekend, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Excellent. I love your example of balancing. Yeah. So a lot of our audience is in the stages of late high school or college and maybe struggling to get through those OChem courses or to just get encouragement from their advisors. I talk to a lot of my mentees who are told by their pre-med advisors, oh, you should probably look at a different career, which is infuriating. But what advice would you have for younger people thinking about a career in medicine?
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, they told me that I shouldn't take so many advanced placement classes because I was going to fail them because they felt that it was going to be too much for me, but only what what you're capable of, right? Only what you can challenge yourself to. So I'm one of those people that when people tell me I can't do something, I want to prove them wrong. And so it makes me want to do it even more. And that's why I ended up taking more advanced classes and going to college earlier to kind of prove my mentor wrong or the guidance counselor. But I think it's really important to show that you're well-rounded when you're applying as well. Obviously, they want to see that you're volunteering somewhere. They want to see that you have some leadership skills. They want to see that you've done some type of activity that has to do with medicine already, whether it's volunteering in a clinic or going to an elder home and volunteering there or something like that to show that what you're getting yourself into and that you really want to do that, right? So I think that's important. If you do some research at any time, that can be helpful. Or if you're a president of some organization or a leadership of some organization, that doesn't have to be medicine involved, but just that you show some hobby and something that you can dedicate yourself to and like excel in. I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a lot of college age students have the myth that it's like, oh, if I fail physics or if I get a C in chemistry or whatever, I can't be a doctor. What would you say to that?
No, I hated chemistry. That was like my worst subject. I loved physics and I did really good in like writing and math, but I hated chemistry. And I feel that there's some teachers that sometimes like they would say they're trying to weed people out, right? They would try to make it harder sometimes so that only certain people would stay. So no, that's not the case. Obviously, in the end, once you get your degree, people are not going to ask you how you did in high school or how you did it even in college. Really, once you get your medical degree, you have your medical degree. Like that's it. Obviously, you want to get your board certifications and pass your exams in medicine. But just because you did bad at one point doesn't mean you're going to keep doing bad as long as you keep challenging yourself and improving. Obviously, a lot of us have this whole imposter syndrome, right? Where we think that we're not good enough to be where we should be, or we're not good enough to like, we try to compare ourselves to everybody else around us. And I think a lot of people of color do this where we're constantly having to over excel because we feel like we don't belong there, or maybe other people make us feel like we don't belong there.
Yeah.
So, but you are enough and you'll be fine as long as you just keep trucking along day by day and keep making changes and moves, you'll get there.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. You recently posted on social media about the scarcity of Latino physicians and specifically female Latino physicians. I think the number is somewhere like 2%, and in endocrinology specifically or in medicine, but it's really low, right?
Really low. They said in endocrine there was no specific numbers, but that it's way less than the estimated 2% that's Latinas in general medicine. And obviously in Utah here, there's very few native Spanish speaking Latinos who are in medicine, right? We have lots of people who learn Spanish, but it's very different. Even in LA, there was definitely a shortage of native Spanish speaking people in higher fields in medicine. And I remember it was such a great way to connect to patients because whenever I'd tell them like, oh, I've been to El Salvador or whatever, then they feel this automatic connection. And they start telling me all these things that they haven't told their other doctors because they feel the doctors won't understand them. And so sometimes the visits have to be a little bit longer. Latin ladies that are older and want to tell you everything, but I love it. So there's this instant like connection and kind of trust just because they feel you understand a little bit more about their background. So we definitely need more native Spanish speaking individuals or Latinos in medicine, in science, in tech, all of that, making policies related to medicine, right?
Yes.
We need our represented out there. I'm from Puerto Rico. I saw a short movie recently. It was like a documentary. It was a movie that had Puerto Rico in it. And I was like, what? Even though Puerto Rico is part of the US, I don't really see it very often in movies, in movies made in the US.
Yeah.
Even, which is so bizarre because it's part of the US. It's easy to get to, but
Right.
I really have not seen Puerto Rico much in movies here. So I was thinking
I
about
agree. Yeah.
so it's like any more representation we can have, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any last words of advice for people considering whether they want to really go through this long, arduous path to becoming a physician?
I would say definitely like shadow providers. I think that was helpful to go with them for a day and just see what their day to day is like and listen to different experiences and different examples because everybody's experience is very different and everybody's trajectory and path is very different to get to where they are. And there's so many fields in medicine that if one doesn't feel right, another one will, right? So if you want to work in the hospital, great. If you want to just do clinic and not go to the hospital, like you'll find things that can fit what you're looking for. So don't be scared off just because you're thinking, like you said, they might think that they're going to work nonstop and not have a life. Like you can create the life that you want. I think specifically once you become an attending and once you get to a certain level in your career, you have a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of say in when you want to work, what days, what time you want to work, what kind of patients you want to see, what diagnoses in patients you want to see. So you'll have more flexibility as you go along the process.
Yeah, you just got to get comfortable asking, right? Because that doesn't come naturally to all of us. Yeah.
And remember to ask for raises too. That's true. Like I remember when I first started my first job, you're coming from residency where you don't get paid much in general. And then you go to start an attending. And I was like happy with anything. I was like, oh, it's a free clinic. Oh, I'm good. And then later they told me like, no, you should have asked for more. We would have given you more if you asked, but I didn't know that. And then obviously you should get like a 3% interest raise every year because of life costs. And then if you get a new degree and that's under your belt that previously wasn't, like you should ask for a raise. And I think that's one thing that a lot of Latinas don't do. I think because we undercredit ourselves and other people are asking for raises and they're getting it because they're asking for it. So just don't be afraid to ask for what you should get.
Yeah, I made the same mistake when I took my first job and I lost out on tens of thousands of dollars over the years that I worked there. But that's a great topic for another episode. I remember 2 last questions I have for you. So, what is the hardest part of being a physician for you?
The hardest part is that I take my work home mentally, right? Where you worry about patients and you worry about decisions you made and you worry about like, did I do the right thing? Did I forget something? Did I miss something? And so sometimes at home, like on the weekends, I'm still thinking about patients. I'm not on call and they're not paging me, but obviously you want to do a good job. And so you take that home and you have to be able to somehow limit that and give yourself your own freedom and your own free time to not over stress about patients. Obviously you want to do good, but you also have to learn to not bring that anxiety home. So I think that's been a little bit tough for me, but I think we have to say, okay, this is my work time. And so this is my free time and try to stick to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do think a lot of physicians can struggle with that. What about your favorite part? What's your favorite part of being a physician?
Wow. I mean, I guess when you make a difference on a patient, that can be really, really rewarding. I've had patients who are grateful because I've helped them lose weight or helpful because I've helped their sugars get better or because I found cancer in them that they didn't know they had. And patients who will tell you that you literally saved their lives or that now they can bend down to tie their shoe and they can go play golf with their grandkids, which they never thought they could before. And so sometimes you don't realize how the impact you have on even just small things in their life to them makes a big difference, but you didn't realize that was the difference that you were going to make. So I think that's really good. I mean, people really trust you to let you into their lives, right? Into what they're feeling, into their fears. And that takes a lot of responsibility and like connection and understanding and non-judgmental, right? Like listening to them in a way that's non-judgmental. So I think that's an honor and a privilege that we get as providers.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Padilla, for being here, for sharing your story and helping to inspire the next generation of physicians.
Thank you so much. And I hope to speak with you again in the future. Thank you.